Hello and welcome everybody to our town hall meeting. Thank you for taking the time so we can come together as a community as we are going through some challenging times. The world is changing. We are implementing social distancing. Companies are shutting down and employees are working remote. But we still are in the position of helping children in need as their needs don't go away. The purpose of today's call is not to dictate your next steps. We, VI, are not implementing any organizational changes or policy at this moment. But today, we would like to just engage in an open and honest conversation about how the coronavirus is affecting your market. We want to learn from everybody how the fundraising is going or not going. We would love to hear if you have a crisis management plan. What is that crisis management plan? And maybe share some best practices. And we have a guest on the phone, who is Lisa Safali, who is going to talk about what can we do as a business during this time of social distancing. As executive directors and CEOs, we are all called to lead our organization. We hope that you go away knowing that you are part of a supportive global community, that you go back to your board and staff with some best practices and helpful tools while we are all in this phase of social distancing. There are a lot of you on this call today. Thank you very much for joining. So I would like for each person to let us know your name and what tent you represent. Also, we have some VI board members joining us as well, so please let yourself be known and welcome. Some housekeepings before we start. We have up to 90 minutes for this call. Please mute your phones until you're ready to engage. When engaging, please identify yourself and your tent. We would like to start to engage in a conversation talking about how this coronavirus is affecting your tent and area. I know we've talked a little bit about before the podcast started. If anybody'd like to share kind of what is happening in your community and how that is affecting your fundraising, I'd like to open up this conversation and this dialogue.
Well, this is Sherry McMichael with Iowa. Since nobody's jumping in, I guess I'll go ahead.
Thank you, Sherry.
Jump in here. We have postponed two events that were scheduled to take place on April 1st April 2nd and April 18th. We have not completely decided what we're doing with this second event, April 18th event, because it is a young variety event that has a lot to do with tastings from restaurants as well as samples from various alcohol vendors. So obviously that is a big red flag with what is going on right now. The other event, a similar event, we've managed to move that to the fall, already have a date set for that for October 22nd, have kept all of our sponsors, had very positive feedback with the communication that we're having, and hopefully everything will move forward and will be a bigger and better event. Relating to what's going on here in Iowa, the governor has closed all restaurants, bars, gyms, casinos, anything of large gatherings, at least until March 31st. I think time will tell on what more will be done. So obviously, that raises concerns for a number of different events. We also have another event in May 9th, right around Mother's Day, a Mommy and Me dance. So we've had initial conversation about what we're going to do when it comes to that, but have not made any decisions, waiting to see. As we all know, things are changing by the hour, waiting to see what's going to happen. We here in Iowa have 21 cases that individuals that have been diagnosed. So, we're on the low end of how things are happening, but it's just overnight 6 cases were diagnosed. So that's kind of where we're at right now.
Thank you, Sherry, for sharing. Anybody else like to chime in?
Right next door in Illinois, this is Angelique. We have canceled both of our March events, and neither of them could be rescheduled due to the nature of them. One was a bunny breakfast for Easter. We were considering doing some Bunny will come visit your house. They'll take pictures, deliver donuts, but that's kind of on the bubble right now too, just because of safety concerns. So that may not happen. And our other fundraiser for March was a March Madness bracket. So that's going to be tough. But as far as the rest of society, I think we're up in the hundreds as far as cases diagnosed. We find out every day at 2:30 what the new rules are, and it sounds like our restrictions are on par with Iowa. So that's our summation.
Go ahead. Who's speaking?
It's Elizabeth in Southern California.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
So it looks for us. I mean, we're fortunate that we do have a reserve fund, but it's been devastating in terms of all of the theaters. Right after Gold Hearts launched, which is our biggest fundraiser, theaters are closed. There are tens of thousands of people out of work, both home office employees and theater employees. We will have to cancel our spring fundraiser, which was our replacement for Day at the Races. So I can't even keep going differently in LA County. I can't. Every time I watch the news conference, I get frustrated, so I turn it off. But yeah, what we're trying to do is focus on some non-event fundraisers. And trying to help. I spoke to the head of Will Rogers yesterday. We're trying to figure out ways to help. Variety can help some of the theater managers. There are major donors, so we want to be there to try to help them in any way. The silent auction was scheduled for CinemaCon. It will go on. We're going to make it a web-based, app-based program, a fundraiser. We're giving everybody just kind of a beat to take a breath with all the layoffs and furloughs going on, and then we will do another push for items. We're working with some of the other chapters that are submitting items for the auction. We're trying to put together another non-event fundraiser. I had conversations with Aisha. We're trying to do a partner fundraiser to help out Northern California. So we see this as pretty devastating. I would estimate that for our tent, it might be a loss of $250,000. So not only do event fundraising, but try to help the people affected by this.
Yeah, that's a big loss there. And I like to hear that you're partnering with other tents to try to support each other in that way. Does anybody else have anything else to share?
Hey, this is Stacy in Texas. I think similar to Elizabeth, we're pretty heavily dependent upon Cinemark and the cinema industry. We had a smaller event. It was more of a fun event for kids and families, not necessarily a fundraising event. Our annual gala is affiliated with Cine Show. I'd be interested to hear what Atlanta's doing. I don't think they're on the call, but our gala is associated with Cine Show, which at this point is scheduled to go forward. However, we are very likely going to cancel our gala and only hold a golf tournament so as to not, well, we can't even call it at this point, but I think that we want to be super conservative in asking the people who have supported us so heavily for so many years for, tremendous support right now. So we don't quite know what will happen with the end of the year. I think Gold Hearts is another conversation. We have a call a little bit later, and not really prepared to fully talk about Gold Hearts right now, but for those of us who have seen money through that, it will be less this year, maybe equivalent to last year. I'm not sure yet. But other than that, Texas is not quite on lockdown like some of the other states, but I know they're leaving it up to different communities to close things down. And that's all I can think of right now.
And this is Lee and Michelle in Detroit. We're in a similar situation. We're probably one step away from a full lockdown. All of our bars, restaurants, theaters are closed. And school is likely going to be out through June, they're starting to predict. So we had to move a children's fashion show from this last weekend, which we've postponed tentatively till late summer. And then we took steps just a couple days ago to move our signature gala, which is May 2nd. And we want to stay ahead of it and move that to the end of August as well. And we have a golf outing on June 15th that's hopeful that it's going to go off, but we're working on some backup contingency plans as well to put that into fall, hopefully before the end of the fiscal year. Just concentrating on trying to postpone rather than cancel wherever we can. We are fortunate that we do have some reserve funds, and we're concentrating on raising awareness that we are still servicing kids who still need us despite all of this uncertainty. We have a food program that runs on the weekends through school, and we pivoted fairly quickly Friday to make sure that we were getting food out to those same families, and did a public distribution with our local sheriff's officers, which they're one of our partners on a regular basis, but was absolutely needed in order to do it safely and effectively. And so we're trying to put our positive spin on it here in Detroit, that we're still here, we're still listening to kids, and we still need support, while maintaining kind of the sensitivity that, we're not asking sponsors to support our big black tie gala at the moment, that we're kind of focusing on what the kids are still going to need, because unfortunately those needs don't change despite how uncertain everything else is as well. So that's kind of where we are in Detroit, hoping that it doesn't come to a full lockdown in the next couple of days, but it does look fairly likely around here.
Great. Thank you for sharing. We had another person who was chiming in.
Lee Burke in Washington, D.C. And as you know, we cover Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. So we're all in different stages of lockdown and different numbers of people who have tested positive. So we had a screening scheduled in April, but that film was pulled. So that was sort of a non-industry group that would donate, and that has been moved to November, hopefully, when that movie releases. And our gala, much like the other galas, it was going to be our first gala this year, our 50th anniversary. We were going to do it with Mid-Atlantic NATO, and that's May 12th. So I have a feeling, again, we don't know, but that will not go off. We had already begun fundraising, so it's a little bit difficult to know what to do with the industry funds that have been donated to us. Everybody's been very kind and understanding, and so we're just pending. We haven't had a Barker's call yet because, as you know, John Fithian is our chair. And so we are just very much in a holding mode, like everybody.
Hi, Charlie from Pittsburgh, Kent 1. I'd say for us, much like the rest of you, the cases are jumping pretty dramatically. Our schools are closed. It's only through March 30th, but everyone's expecting it to continue to be increased. We have two dominant health systems in the west of Pennsylvania. They're mobilizing to do testing, and they've been pretty active. And so people are hopeful, but very, very, very concerned. I'd say for us organizationally, it's also a challenge. We're a small tent, 6.5, I guess, FTEs. And, we have one of our staff is a mother of two who are 3 months and 2 years old. And her husband's a pharmacy manager. And obviously there's a lot of pressure in the grocery stores, and pharmacies are being hit with people calling off sick, people who have to stay home to take care of their kids. So, we're trying to figure out the staffing issues of being caring for our employees and also juggling that with running the organization. I'd say for us, where we are in the year right now, we had a lot of, well, I shouldn't say a lot. We had probably 5 events coming up where we'd be presenting, 120 pieces of adaptive equipment in conjunction with our partners in schools. All of those have to be rescheduled, and because the schools are shut down. And we have a thing called intermediate units in Pennsylvania, which provide services to kids with they provide special ed services for kids with special needs. And we have 500 school districts in Pennsylvania, so that's another challenge, just the size of that number of school districts. But I think we're kind of in a holding pattern, trying to figure it out. People are working from home like you guys, and we're just trying to take it really a step ahead, but try to do some effective planning that we can come to grips with. We're already, I think, looking for an alternate date for our June golf outing. And, so that's kind of where things are. We're kind of taking it as an opportunity to relook at the organization and how can we reposition some things while this time is going on.
Thank you, Charlie.
Jeff in Manitoba.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, like everywhere else, we're seeing new announcements every day. Schools are shut down, and, they're moving towards all non-essential services being shut down here in Manitoba. And, like I said, the daily announcements sort of are certainly moving in that direction. Obviously, there's, everybody's inboxes are inundated with messages related to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we are rethinking our communication strategy with the people who would normally, be seeing our social media stories and receiving newsletters and e-blasts and whatnot. We have a scheduled May 2nd event, which is our largest fundraiser of the year, our gala. And so we're going to have a special meeting with the board of directors next Thursday to talk about what our plan is for that, as well as sort of the plan around revenue and expenses for the foreseeable future. Here, I have a very good friend that's sort of in the war room, I'll call it, of our provincial health system, and their fear is that when things do open themselves back up, when the cases stop increasing on a daily basis, and life, quote unquote, resumes, that we're going to see several sort of different sort of cycles of this coming back through, where we start up, we shut down, we start up, we shut down, which is a little bit scary. So we're also in a position where we're fortunate enough to have some reserve funds. We aren't anticipating needing to use those at this point. And the interesting thing for us as a tent that's sort of been rebuilding itself the last 3 years is basically the forecasted 6 months in for us for the year in terms of special needs cases is still double what they were last year, which was scary, but in a good way, before all of this happened. And so we're watching our expenses. And then in the meantime, of course, because people's horizon of caring has shrunk so dramatically, where we're worrying about people's basic needs and whatnot being met. Interestingly enough, since all of this sort of took off here, certainly the phones are quiet, and the mail service and the emails are quiet in the sense of new applications for our special needs program coming in. And so that's kind of scary in a different way, but encouraging, I guess, if you want to put that spin on it as well, that maybe things do cool off a little bit there. Also because a great deal of the programming that we have is school-based, and for at least the next 3 or 4 weeks, we know none of that will take place. In the sort of best case of optimism for when things do sort of resume and kids get back to school, we're expecting to see a reduction in costs there as well, because none of those services are obviously being utilized at this point.
Jeff, when's your school term end officially? Because I know there was a comment on the call that for some of the U.S. schools, school will be dismissed for the rest of the year. When is your school?
Yeah, there'll be some variances within Canada, first of all, in terms of public or private system, but typically it's the end of June.
And then you also have a gala as well. What's your thought about that? Everybody's kind of canceling some of their events or putting things on hold or kind of waiting up to the last minute. What's happening on your end?
Yeah, so what I would say at this point is I don't want to say too much until the board has approved the plan. I know that, again, with there not being any real end in sight, that there are lots of organizations that have said that they're going to postpone and move it to the fall at this point. We would be leaning to canceling the event, and obviously the reduction in cost again from not hosting an event, and still going out and talking to all those people that have committed to us, and again reinforcing that messaging of how important it is for kids to get what they need, even more so at a time like this. And then we would move to a virtual platform related to all the sort of fundraising that we would normally do at the event. And, again, timing TBD on all that stuff, because I don't think, we don't have to have that activity taking place now. And I think that, again, people's primary concern is about their own personal safety at this point. So that would be a bit of a wait and see. And because our event, as of this year, is honoring an individual, we would, again, need to factor that into the plan as to what we would do in lieu of having our big gala this year, to still make sure that when the time is right, that we're able to put on some sort of a public event to still honor that individual. And sorry, the one last thing that I should mention is, again, I'm not sure what the message is in the U.S., but certainly in Canada, they, are asking all Canadians to come home, and they've closed the border to international travelers, other than sort of, I'll call it again at this point, that essential supply chain things like, trucks going back and forth between the U.S. and Canada, delivering those essential goods that we all need to, survive.
Yes.
Well, this is Aisha, Northern California. So I, obviously some of you folks saw the email that I sent out. So we are in a rather unusual position, as well as I am privy to some interesting information. So if everybody will bear with me a little bit, I'd like to share a little bit of not only me, but what I'm hearing from the state superintendent of schools, and a fellow who's currently working on antiviral drugs. And so what I'm hearing from everybody is how to prepare for your business, how to prepare for the kids you serve, et cetera. But we had 7 Bay Area counties go into shelter-in-place mode. You're only allowed to leave your home for essential items like pharmacy and groceries. And the majority of workers started being sent home. Like Salesforce 2 weeks ago had 36,000 employees that were allowed to come in on one day and then were to telecommute from then on. And that was just in downtown San Francisco in the financial district. So we saw the impact immediately. So we started seeing actual COVID issues 2 months ago. And we started seeing the conventions cancel, which was a significant impact and loss of business on my preview room, because we get a lot of corporate offsites that book with us. And so we were almost immediately impacted back around Valentine's Day. We knew that we lost all of our film screening business, our convention business, our corporate business, and our individual bookings as the fear started to grow very quickly, because back then the mayor of San Francisco started going on with daily press conferences. So we immediately looked at February, March, April, and May, 100% loss of all of our preview room business, which was an immediate impact of $50,000 in lost revenue. Then we started talking to everybody that affected each industry. So, for example, Allied is a large publicist, and we started speaking with them about the film screenings. And we knew immediately, long before everybody else, that 007 was being moved to the fall, and many other films were either going to be delayed or held off until 2021, which impacted anything we thought maybe we could recoup if it rescheduled later. If we're waiting a year, that business is gone. We can't wait that long. The corporate conventions are like, we'll come back next year. The corporate businesses, everybody's working from home. Nobody's leaving their houses. It immediately impacted individual giving, because everybody started to panic and wonder if they were going to have a paycheck. Everybody started to wonder if they can't get out of their house. And, they're worried about the essentials. They're not worried about the organization. People that I've applied to for grants, even for emergency funding, have strictly said to me, look, we're going to go to national organizations only that are going to do things like food bank and emergency medical relief efforts. We've had mayor's orders and governor's orders asking construction work sites and restaurants, if you've got rubber gloves and masks,
we're asking you to turn them over to your local hospitals. The shelter in place extended further out to my county and all the way north of Sacramento last night. I just got an email because I'm a past president of a school board. So I just got an email from Tony Thurman, who's actually a friend of mine. He's the state superintendent for California schools. And he said most likely the children will not return to school until the fall. So that impacts all of our after school programs, everything that we worked with children to that capacity. So what that also affects is all of our disabled families that are home. They're not able to get a lot of the services. They're a medically vulnerable population. The services now are not being sent to their homes. They can't go out to the services. This is where, they're getting creative and they're having to order their own equipment and do things online where they need our help, and I can't fund anything. I'm looking at probably maybe bankruptcy protection. Unfortunately, most of you know from like the Texas conference when I was pretty open and honest in our circle there where I said, we'd had 2 really bad years, and I've been band-aiding my chapter together for 2 years, and we had a very small reserve of only about $52,000, which I had spent down. I had a small little nugget left in it of about $8,000 in a Charles Schwab account that has been depleted to half because of the tanking of the stock market. And we were advised by a financial advisor to leave it in there because they said they thought they saw a bounce coming sooner, and it isn't there. So what we know is from the CDC officials that I've been in direct contact with, and we have a donor and a former renter of the preview room, and if anybody wants to watch the Netflix series called Pandemic, his company was featured in it. Actually, he did a binge-watching party with his staff the day after it came out back in very early February, and the very next day the coronavirus was announced. And his company is called Distributed Bio. You can follow him. I strongly recommend you do because he is working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. He has a military grant. He's going back and forth between DC and his lab in South San Francisco. His name is Jacob Blanville. He is working with international scientists. His goal is to create, like I said, the antiviral drug, which he believes he will be able to go to testing by April 7th, which oddly enough is our first review of our shelter in place is April 7th for all of these counties. Right now, our schools are out for the next 5 weeks in all of Northern and Central California. And so he's trying to get this out because the way that he sees it is everybody should have a business model for 9 weeks. Because right now we are not, as Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's on all the time with the president, said, we are not seeing the peak yet because right now we're not into the bell curve. And so what the shelter in place has afforded scientists like Jacob is the ability to have everybody stay home so we don't get more new cases. We already know if you say you have 100 cases in one place, it's more than likely like 1,100 diagnoses, but we haven't been able to test everybody yet. So right now they're turning Moscone Center, our largest convention hall in Northern California. They're building it out. A friend of mine's brother's construction company is building out 5,000 beds to turn it into an ICU facility, and that news has not been released yet. I was just told while we were on the call. He's been brought up from Las Vegas because all the casinos closed down, and they're building it out as an ICU. Many of you probably heard the 2 hospital ships that will be off the coast. The Princess Cruise Lines that were brought in with the foreign tourists into the Oakland port are currently being cleaned, and they're being turned into hospital ships. So once we can get a hold of this and slow the progression, then they'll be able to start treating it with antiviral. They won't have a vaccine to stop it for at least a year. So all these physicians that I'm hearing from that I'm actually friends with and the CDC and the state superintendent are giving us a picture for us as an organization. We will not be able to go out and do any more distribution or programs. We are all going to eventually end up in a shelter in place. And in fact, I'm being told here in California, more than likely Northern California, by the end of the week, because as they said on the news this morning, the millennials are still going out partying because they think they won't be affected by it. We're probably looking at martial law for us here. What we really are able to see, though, is there will be a coming out of it. But I'm developing a 9-week plan. I have a 5 to 6 week plan, a 9-week plan, and then a 6-week plan. And the 6-month plan. And the 6-month plan will be the bounce. And that'll be when we're able to start coming out of our houses. Our kids will be able to start going back to school. Unfortunately, by the end of the fiscal year, I'm hoping I can last that long. I'm applying for an SBA, a small business emergency loan. I'm applying for the Center for Disaster Philanthropy for a grant. Most of the private corporate grants have all been turned down because they're all funding otherwise. like I said, the national organizations that are doing disaster relief. And so while obviously we're mission specific to a vulnerable population and a medically vulnerable population, we're not big enough and our program reach isn't to that capability, nor are we able to go out because we're not considered an essential organization. We're not publicly funded by the government to do essential service provision. We will not be allowed to provide services, is what I'm being told, because of the shelter-in-place orders. So, unfortunately, I don't know if Variety NorCal will survive this, to be very honest. And yes, I am working with Elizabeth. I've reached out to USV. Obviously, we're all talking today. I've talked to people in the entertainment industry about my business, meaning the screening room. I've talked to my corporate clients. I've talked to city officials, county officials, state officials. We are in full crisis mode. We have a crisis management plan. My board is meeting tonight. We have already done things like, because of the lockdown, what we've done is I actually put a forward on the mail from the company, from the organizational address, from my board president. I hope, knock on wood, he's currently sick. His doctor is waiting 2 days before issuing an order to have him go and be tested. But if he can, and he is able to, because he's the only one in San Francisco, the rest of my board members live outside of the city. And while they are not ticketing yet, they are telling people they are not allowing for inter-county travel at this point unless you can prove it's essential. But he's going to go in and check the mail. But I do have a forward coming to my P.O. box. And while we do have a shelter in place, we are allowed to go out and do essential things like groceries and mail. So I am hoping the checks from the studios that owe us from the award season, which is about $30,000, will start coming in, because we've been personally calling them and begging them. Of course, now, as more and more companies are sending their staff home, they're not allowed to work from the office. So we're hoping that those accounting departments were able to cut some of those bigger checks before some of these things cease to function. But we are in full-blown crisis mode in Northern California. So that's, I mean, if anybody wants to discuss anything further on the education level, the state superintendent, because like I said, I'm privy to a lot of information because I'm a past president of the school board, or if you want to hear what I know about what Jake is doing for his testing for the antiviral, or the CDC information I've gotten, I'm happy to share that with anybody offline.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Real quick, can you give us, what's Jacob's last name again?
Glanville, Glanville, and the company is Distributed Bio, all one word. He's posting daily videos on LinkedIn. He's pretty well accepting everybody's friend requests on Facebook, but you can follow his company or his personal page on either one of those social media.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing. If we have some time later on, perhaps you can share what your 6-month plan going down, because you mentioned something about your 6 months, 6 weeks. It would be good maybe as for best practices, we could hear that, and maybe everybody else can kind of share what their plan is for the next 6 months as well. So appreciate you giving us this overview of what's happening in Northern California. It does sound very serious, and this is a serious time. So we appreciate you being very candid and honest about what is going on in your market and how it will affect the world. I wanted to transition over to talk about, staffing and staffing issues and what do we do as a business. We just had our town hall meeting last night with Australia, Hong Kong, New Zealand, and a big piece of that was talking about this working from remote and working home, and how do we keep staff morale, and how do we keep our staff not fearing of losing their jobs or so forth. So I invited Lisa Shefali into this conversation so she can help us give some insight about things we could do as a business while we are remote. Maybe Lisa, you could share a little bit about some of the staff morale as well. This is kind of something that just newly popped up, and it was a conversation they all kind of really wanted to know, what can we do, and maybe we can all share some of our best practice here of what we can do in terms of our staffing and staffing issues. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa as she discusses what we can do as a business during the time of social distancing. Lisa?
Great. Thanks, Erica. Thanks, everyone. So just want to give you some background perspective. I ran a nonprofit for 8 years, so I'm familiar with the world within which you're operating in right now. Currently, as a day job, I with Legacy Bowes, which we are an organization consulting firm. So we help organizations grow. We help them with organizational concerns, obstacles, as well as we assist organizations who don't have HR departments on what to do. So what I'd like to share with you, the conversations we're having today, you have to know that there are conference calls going on like this around the world. So regardless of what your product or service is, regardless of the size of your organization, everyone is having these same conversations, because if you're not in crisis mode now, you will be eventually. It is on a curve. And so it does not appear that any one industry is going to be saved from any of this. So everyone is dealing with the same issues. So what I'd like to do today is I'm just going to share with you I'm going to share with you what we have done internally as Legacy Bowes as a case study. If you could listen to it with opportunity as a means of how could you translate what we're doing to your own firm. And then I'd like to share with you what we can possibly do as a variety tent organization. Okay, so if we all assume, yes, the best time to have created a crisis management plan would have been quite a few years ago, so that you could pull it out today. For those of you who don't have one, you're here. What can you do? So first of all, let's address this phrase of working from home. For those of you who have young employees, most of them do not know how to work from home. Working effectively from home usually happens with experience, work experience. And therefore, as leaders, this is our time to really show that we can define what working from home is. Providing them actual tasks and projects to do, because working from home, it's easy right now in this situation. People have the best of intentions, but they won't work from home. They will, in fact, get caught up in the CNN news, whatever's on, and anxiety will grow. When we talk about anxiety with our employees, everybody will have varying degrees of anxiety. We can't judge. We don't know what one person will fixate on and what one person will not. We are working in an environment where we have multiple generations, and they will surprise you in terms of what the expectations are, what they think is detrimental, and what they believe is not. So it's important that when we think of working from home is, have you defined what true working from home is? And so what I would suggest is create a schedule for your employees, and perhaps lay out, the reality is I can expect you to work from home for 6 hours a week. Let's be honest, 6 hours a day, not that full 8. Lay out for them when they should be taking their breaks. If you can provide that to them, then they themselves can be constructive in the time that they're having. In terms of communication as well, encourage continual communication. So as much as you may have always not been a micromanager, you're not going to be a micromanager now. You're going to be a caring manager and a caring leader, and offer that communication to them. So that was sort of the first phrase that I think too often what we're hearing is we're all working remotely, we all have to work remotely, but what does that really mean? And people get lost, and people don't. People want to feel productive right now. You need to give your employees options so that they can feel productive, because their worst fears are coming through as, I'm going to get laid off tomorrow. And that could end up being a discussion that you end up having, yes, but at this point they want to be productive. So I'm going to share with you what we've done. So our team of executive search and recruitment, we could work remotely at home 365 days a year, because what we do is we work with clients, we find candidates for them, we do so much of it online and collect information until the very end, where we bring them the final individuals to meet. So what I've done with my team is I set them all up at home They all have full access to the network. We have every day, we have daily 10:30 to 11:30 in the morning calls. Specifically at 10:30 have been chosen because I need them to feel that they need to get something done on their own between that 8:30 to 10:30 time, but we want to check in. And so what we're checking in on is actual productivity. What are you working on? How's it going? So with our existing work, what are you working on? And that's our 10:30 to 11:30 call. We then have a check-in call at 4 o'clock for 30 minutes, and that call, the conversation is different. Conversation there is, how are things going? What, any obstacles that you've run into? How are you feeling? So that's a softer call that we talk about. What have you heard? What have you seen on the news today? Because we know they're watching their feeds, or they're watching TV, or they're exchanging emails with other people in their industry. So we want to alleviate their anxiety and their thought process of where they're at. As a partner in the firm, I use that point of time to talk about what we've accomplished today, but also what the partners are discussing. Obviously, as partners and senior leaders, whether it's you and your board, we're doing it every Monday. So we're talking about, okay, where are we at this week? What are the conversations we're having? What are we going to have to talk to our team about? We're encouraging continual communication. My plan on this is for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks, we're going to do this. What we've also done, so of our 10:30 calls, we're having a complete team meeting once a week. So that's sort of a variation of the theme where, because we've got 3 distinct pieces to our business, we're having everybody once a week so that everybody can share. And we're doing this by Zoom video. And interestingly enough, it's worth it to have everyone's face on the screen. They've made comments that, wow, this feels like we ourselves are on CNN TV. And I said, well, maybe on Friday we're going to have some levity, and I'm going to give you a country, and I'm going to give you a topic, and you're going to just give us a little update. You need to add some of that levity. So as much as you think, wow, 5 hours a week seems to be a lot, we need to keep a gauge on where our employees are at. Now, very specifically, beyond the work they're doing, they each have a research project. This is the time for research and development. This is the time to do some of those other work where they can feel productive, that is necessary work, that perhaps they can do research on. So in our business, it would be, what are some of the other industries that we could be approaching when things get better? What about another person who's working on all our specific target group? We do a lot of work with nonprofit organizations. So someone is looking at all the nonprofit organizations. Someone else is looking at our current clients over the last 6 years. So I've got one person looking at the last 3 years and one person looking at the 3 years before that. Another area that we do work in is career transition. So sadly, we're not looking to exploit our potential customers, but we do know that there will be large amount of clients who may need career transition work. So we're having someone look at that and say, how can we be of service to that industry or that group of industries to say, hey, if it comes, push comes to shove, you want to protect your brand. Everyone's going to be disappointed, but if you have to do a career transition, it's better to walk someone out the door in a very respectful manner, that you're giving them support, than it is simply to let them go and have them think and communicate of how you dealt with employees during this horrible time, versus, when things are great and you bring people on, or when things are great, you just deal with people very well. So the intent there, and I took this lead from a manufacturing company in 2008, where rather than laying off their engineers, they had them all work on R&D. And so when they were able to get out of that curve, they were in fact able to be prepared for new products, new services. So that's where we're at, and what I'm finding is that morale is up, everyone is enthused, we're talking to everyone, people are feeling like they are contributing, and I'm able to gauge where they are at personally as well, because that's going to come into play. In terms of looking at what are some of the options, so let's talk about layoffs. And in terms of layoffs, and if you have to release people, obviously you've got requirements that are state or provincial legislated that you need to fall within, and it's definitely very important to be on top of what those are. But I encourage you to have, when the time comes, have a group discussion with the employees. They may be able to come up with some really creative solutions. Some of the things that we're looking at obviously will be reduced work weeks. If you choose to go to a reduced work week or job share, what I would suggest, if you can pull off 60%, give them 3 days a week and have them overlap on Wednesday. That way they're not in by themselves, or they see themselves as, oh, this is a dying shift. They actually have a day where they can convene together, they can have lunch together. So if you're going to go 3 days a week, if you can, have them overlap versus, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, where all you're ever saying to anybody, even as you move forward and 6 months from now, as you move forward and you're talking to clients, Monday, Wednesday, Friday doesn't work well because no matter who you're talking to, all you're ever saying is, I'm not in tomorrow. I'm not in tomorrow. In terms of the flexibility, again, if it's simply 5 days a week, but you're going to reduce pay. If you're going to reduce pay and you know they're working from home, you could do that. Could you say, reduce pay, but I'm going to give you 4 days a week? So think of each day as being that 20% marker and look at that. The other piece is paid leave. If they find out where their other side is, are they in a position to be able to say, okay, you can do a rotating shift of certain individuals will work for these period of time, and then the next individual can work the next period of time. Let's say 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off. That conversation is harder because you think of people who need continual income, but you'd be surprised at depending on where their partners or spouses are at, maybe it can be worked at differently. In terms of expense control, this is a time where everyone will understand expense control. Be really diligent of where your expenses are. Reach out to every single one of your suppliers. See how you can make payment arrangements on their end and say, look, what would, could we extend and not have to pay our bill for another 3 months or another 6 months or every second month? Understanding that everyone will be in the same boat. Everyone will be looking for cash flow. However, depending on what their industry is about, perhaps they can give you some relief as well on that expense control. In terms of our variety donors, so this is a great time to look at all of our spreadsheets and say, wow, what is the percentage of event revenue versus donor revenue? Obviously, this topic has been at every conference that we've talked at. Every nonprofit says the same thing, no matter what industry we're in, is if we can get direct donors versus rely on event revenue, we will be further ahead. Here's an opportunity. If you can, go to your event donors right now and say, are they in a position to give you a pass this year, have you cancel the event, and accept a charitable receipt? If you think of corporate donors, corporate sponsors, they are just as much in a dilemma whereby they've already paid the money out. So us, for example, as Legacy Bows, we support all our clients. We support many gala dinners. We also have to fill those seats. And yes, you generate revenue when I bring people in those seats. But right now, are we in a position there? We've paid out that money. Could we write it off? Yeah, because I won't have the same amount of time that I will be able to attend all those dinners. So if you give me a pass, it's an opportunity where we can focus on our business as we need to, and perhaps you can actually keep all that revenue without incurring the cost of holding an event. Because The reality is, if everyone moves to the fall, let's say the fall opens up, well, you're not going to have multiple events on multiple weeks. On the same week, you're going to have multiple events on multiple days. And people will still end up having a table. You're going to have to incur the cost, and people won't be showing up. So this is the time that it's not thinking outside the box. I'm going to challenge you. It's a cube. Turn over that cube and look at things in a totally different way. I don't know if you've ever, all of you go back to your kitchen today, wipe your cabinets, and then once you think they're clean, look at it upside down from the bottom up, and you'll notice that there's areas you've missed. So if anyone has any specific questions, that's all sort of I have to say specifically. I'm not going to comment on your specific labor codes and so forth because I wouldn't know them across all the different provinces and states. However, I would gladly accept phone calls or any questions you have on how to approach this so we can all get this together. And one last comment, I agree. There was a report that came out of South Korea. The biggest impact to flattening this curve are the 20 to 29-year-olds. Whatever we do, we need to keep them inside.
Thank you, Lisa, very much. This was such helpful information. I will send out a follow-up email with your information so that people, the callers, those on a caller, could go ahead and reach out to you. A takeaway from this, because you have given us such a lot of information here, and very helpful information, looking at some of the beginnings of what this can look like in terms of how do we support our employees, how do we support our donors, and then to kind of some of the extreme, when we're talking about maybe laying off or, stagnating some of the shifts in order so we can still keep our doors open and serve our clients and do what we do as a business. The thing I thought it was really interesting what you talked about was I kind of paraphrase it as finding that niche, because as your business is growing, or as you guys are as you are at home right now, you're doing more projects and you are looking at what's ahead, how this business is going to evolve and where that niche is and how you can benefit from that. And so I know last night we were talking about what our fundraising is going to look like in the next 6 months to a year, and how we're going to be having to get more creative in our fundraising. So I'm encouraging, everybody, let's really have some of those conversations on what can we do for fundraising as we're going into a new era of trying to raise money for our organization. So I've been getting a lot of feedback afterwards, and I think that's going to be another topic that we can all just have a conversation about and brainstorm and think about best practices, is really get deep into the fundraising and seeing what creatively we can do as an organization, and and how we can secure funding. So really great information. Thank you so much for providing that to everybody. Is there any more questions?
Erica, this is Sherry from Iowa. I just have one question. You had a town hall meeting with the other countries. Can you give us a brief overview of how the other countries are reacting to the virus and what's going on with them as well?
Sure, I'd be happy to. In fact, I was going to read off. Lorraine from New Zealand sent a nice message that she wanted to send to everybody. I would say, as a snapshot, everybody's going through, tremendous amount of trying to figure out what to do next. Some employees are already working remote, so they're transitioning over to using Zoom or Team, and trying to keep, staff morale up. They are also looking at postponing or just canceling a lot of their events. Some have already been canceled, so they're seeing up to $250,000 in revenue loss to $1.4 million in revenue loss. The Australian Association or all of Australia does a bash, which brings in a lot of revenue, and respectively to each tent, it can be up to $1.4 million, $1.5 million in revenue, and they're hanging on to the last thread in order to not cancel it because that's a significant drop. They do have some reserves funds, so they are in a financial state right now, or they feel comfortable. They're working with their boards to be sure that everybody's understanding of that this is going to be a really tough time, and it's just not the now, but it's looking at another 6 months to a year on the financial impact, and that this may be a year to just kind of hold off and not have a great amount of expectations. I want to read what Lorraine Taylor from New Zealand had shared with the group. She wasn't able to be on the call last night, but she sent an email out, and I want to share with what she has. She says, our strategy is to continue to be single-minded around our purpose, the changing needs of children and their families. 1, we identify likely issues vulnerable families may face in the coming weeks and months, i.e. digital divide, should children be sent home and learning is online. 2, exploring new offerings or increasing existing programs is, if relevant, to provide support to vulnerable families during this virus. 3, redesigning our fundraising appeals to communicate the issues vulnerable families are or will confront. 4, appeal to existing donors to give more if they can to support their sponsor's child, i.e. donations to help to stock the pantries or sponsor another child. 5, for those monthly donors that have to opt off, providing options such as reducing their monthly commitment or taking a 3-month giving holiday. And 6, winter appeal will change to be an emergency crisis appeal, quote unquote, with dollars matching by one or our corporate partners, and will start immediately. Business continuity. Business continuity. 1, business continuity plans develop. 2, working remotely. In the last few years, we have invested significantly in our infrastructure, IT infrastructure, and all the teams can work remotely anywhere, anytime. All files are on Microsoft SharePoint. We are running a test tomorrow where everyone will work from home so that in the event we do all need to work remotely, we have an ironed out plan and an issue early. We are primarily testing communication channels to ensure the team feels connected and our donors and families can reach us. Flexible working, and I think Lisa mentioned something about this, for those who take public transportation, who have agreed to flexible working policies to ensure they can travel at some time. Team communication, messaging to team, no longer business as usual. Unexpected times call for unexpected actions on variety part. Regular communication, email, and face-to-face time is important, and they have a information and government stimulation package that they're referring back to. So team and self-isolation, one of our teams returned from the overseas, and that team member will be working from home remotely for the 14-day period. So right now they are not completely shut down, but they are looking at, as they're going to have to transition to the complete shutdown, what that looks like. On a financial end, following the GFC, we created an endowment fund, Future Kiwi Kid Fund, which is USD $850,000, precisely for this situation to smooth out our grant giving. It is likely we will draw on some of these funds over the coming months to ensure that we can continue and increase, if required, our grant giving at this time of need. In addition, we hold a further cash flow of $450,000. That's USD. We are undertaking financial remodeling to anticipate likely revenue reduction, identifying cost savings and the best solutions for their Kiwi fund. In terms of fundraising, since the GFS, we have focused our efforts on creating a diversified income portfolio, which is largely comprised of individual giving. Event fundraising makes up just 10%. We are seeing a downturn in events, and some regular givers are stopping their donations. However, we remain confident that the steps we have put in place previously will ensure our visibility to continue to serve New Zealand family. Now, I'll pause in that because that was a subject we also talked to the Australian Association, is that they are looking at their direct mailing appeal to see if that could be a resource in fundraising. So they're really focusing on the non-event side of it and really focusing on how they were able to directly fundraise to families without having an event. Board support. My last day at the Variety is March 27th. Our board chair will continue to be the interim CEO until my replacement is found. Other directors are providing support to help guide decision making, and it will closely work with them. So that's from New Zealand. You can see they do have a robust cash flow, which is really helpful, though they have a robust need in their communities. So, looking at how that all pans out, I think we're all in a position of wondering, jeopardy of what's going on with our environment or our organization. I also will remind everybody that this is recorded, and we are going to put this on a podcast. We'll email the podcast out, and so that everybody will have all of the town hall meetings, all 3 of them, so you all can listen to it at home or as with your staff and coworkers, and have open discussions about that. Lastly, we've got about 8 minutes. We've really used up this time. I wanted just to quickly talk about crisis management plan, and just to hear if you have a crisis management plan, and what is your crisis management plan?
Can I interrupt? This is Deb from Kansas City. Before we talk about crisis management plan, we've been working closely with a lot of our families that are wanting just material for themselves personally. We've created a poster that people can put on their door with a child, with a Variety child, that says, "Someone in this house has a weak immune system. Please practice social distancing as a preventive measure for their safety. Think of me." I'm going to have those on our Facebook if anyone wants to copy those and use them for their family's to print. We're trying to look at little ways that we can help them out and support them. And that's just one thing that they're asking for. So I'll have that on our Facebook. If anyone wants to use it and share it with their families, they're more than welcome to.
That's great. Thank you for that resource. And if anybody else has any resources they would like to share that they can share to everybody, feel free to let us all know. Okay, so touching quickly about crisis management, is there anybody who'd like to share quickly about their crisis management plan, or if they have a plan? If not, what could they do as a crisis management plan?
Well, this is Aisha. Our crisis management plan is probably maybe not the best to share, just because it's so specific to our situation here. It's a little like living in a zombie apocalypse sci-fi movie. So what we really did was we broke it down to, obviously, crisis management plan is when one, theoretically in this case, is already broken out, versus planning for one. There's not as many what-if scenarios because we're already in it. So this is more specific. So we already have staff that work remotely. For example, my preview room coordinator actually lives in Ohio. And I've been finding oftentimes her governor does things before ours does. But anyway, and my bookkeeper's in Missouri. So we already work remotely. That's not something I'm concerned about. I have 3 1099 contractors. So what we went through and we kind of looked at was, there's remotely, and then there's critical remote, and then there's emergency. And that's just the different phases of shutdown and lockdown. So we immediately, from 2 months ago, we went from remote to critical remote. And what that really meant was looking at administratively, how does the organization function, operate for us? That meant bricks and mortar, the screening room. How did that affect that business? And so we went from an administrative operations plan of how to literally cover banking, mail, staff communications, board communications, the immediate effects of the budget. Then, they phased out with further detail into critical remote and how that changed everything. And it became just the ED and a designated officer, which is my president. And, you know, who gets assigned as a designated officer, because it can't be a member of the board, it needs to be an officer, and ideally it's your president, but maybe that's not all necessary for all of you wherever you are. It may also depend on, like for us, it just turns out my president happens to be the only member of my board or staff that actually resides within the city and county limits. So for things that are critical mass, either as a spokesperson for the organization or dealing with the immediate business affairs that require someone to actually travel to on-site, he's the only one that can do it. And having those things in advance and thinking about those. We also, you know, went to other options. Like I said, we forwarded our mail so that I can still receive any, you know, critical communications that come through the mail. Maybe it's donations, or maybe it's the payments from the studios. And how do we utilize, you know, the next steps? For us, it went to going to mobile banking, where I can do mobile deposits through our checking account. They never used to have that at Wells Fargo. For businesses, it used to be individuals only. So if you do that kind of thing, make sure you're able to do that. We cut non-essential expenses, also non-essential staff. I've been in twice a week communication with my staff, daily with my president, so it's talking about what are your plans during those times when you get to that. Because we're not allowed during, you know, we're shelter in place, and we're also not allowed to travel out across the county. We have to look at the other things that are critical, and we don't know the end of this. Plus, like Elizabeth, I'm heavily impacted by the exhibitor industry, the movie theaters, and the people that support them, like Dolby Laboratories and things like that. This is a time where they've all come to a screeching halt. They don't know where their next paycheck's going to come from. They're all working from home if they still have a job, or they've been furloughed. I can't go to them and ask them for sponsorships, and I certainly don't have the money. So I had to actually not send, even though we'd signed the contract, I couldn't send the deposit for our only signature major fundraiser, which is our golf event, which would have been October 2nd. And so that means I can't fundraise from those individuals. I can't ask for those sponsorships. I won't have that early income in. I can't guarantee my slot at a very prestigious golf course, the Presidio, which was going to be our first year moving it actually into San Francisco, because I can't send them the deposit. So our only signature event for the year has been canceled. My bookkeeper is going to be laid off, and those duties will shift to my preview room coordinator and myself. And so we've already released the non-essential expenses. We're talking to everybody that we're on contract with, including our lease, which unfortunately we're tied into for 2023, which is why we might have to file for bankruptcy, which means we would have to release the preview room. And then where we would shift all the assets within, I have no idea. But we're discussing that today on the board. You know, you have to look at all of those things. And I do talk to my main staff member daily. My bookkeeper is also a 1099, but my preview room coordinator and I, because she's working at all our invoicing and collections, she's critical. So I can't release her. We've already gone to using QuickBooks Online, so we're prepared to do all of those things in this type of situation. So for us, working remotely is not a problem. Doing the executive functions of the organization to maintain administration, we've already addressed. That's not a problem. That's in our crisis management plan. The challenge for us has been that we couldn't foresee this situation coming. And then those that are the people that owe us, like I said, have all been sent home, so we don't even know if their accounting departments will even pay us the money that they're owed us. So, you know, we used to say when this all first started happening, like I said 2 months ago, that it was changing daily, and then it went to hourly. And now most of us are saying, and even with my public agencies and the sheriff's department that I work closely with in Sonoma County, it changes on the quarter hour for us in this region. And so the plan, like I said, it changes constantly. But right now we've gone, like I said, from remote to critical, remote to emergency, and that's where we are in our crisis management plan. The challenge is all that really leaves left is the individual donors, and they're in survival mode. I had someone short of basically telling me to F off the other day because they were literally in personal survival mode, and that was the CEO of the company. And so, you know, it's people can't see out of it right now because of that constant changing. And the daily press conferences have people literally living on edge. So what I can recommend for you is truthfully sit down, look at your administrative operations, like Lisa said. How does that affect your staffing? How does it affect your executive functions? Look to how much can you do off-site. Designate your officer, your second go-to. Maybe it's the person that's closest to your office, or proximity to maybe public agency government functions that you might need to access. Look at your banking, look at your mail solutions. because, this is an unknown. Like I said, Jake told me personally, Jacob Glanville, he said, look at a 9-week immediate solution for your business. I'm not sure I can last 9 weeks. That's why I have a 5 to 6 week also. And then, obviously all of us have 6 months till the end of the fiscal year, and that would be where they're predicting a bounce with the stock market. That's a long way off. That's really kind of my recommendation to everybody, and that's our crisis management plan. But of course, we're in survival mode. I'm happy to hear that the rest of the members of the Variety family are in maybe more of a remote phase than a critical remote or an emergency remote. And I wish you all luck, and I greatly appreciate Elizabeth's assistance and Erica Lopez. Thank you so much for reaching out this morning. If I get any additional CDC or that type of information, agency type info that maybe isn't publicly being shared, I'll send it out to y'all. But like I said, we're in survival mode.
Thank you so much. You brought out some really great tips and tools for us to think about. Anybody else have more to share about their crisis management plan? I think that, it's sounding like we could segue into talking about fundraising and appropriate times to fundraise. I think that that's going to be a critical time for us to kind of think about when is a time where the heat is, when is an appropriate time to start asking for money and start, actively fundraising. And especially you have, the extreme where we're in crisis mode, to an extreme crisis mode where then we are in a position where we're just kind of starting off. But I think that could be a great subject we can talk about on our next call, because I think that's going to be a critical for everybody to talk about. And how do we gingerly, I guess, or gently start, reaching out to our donors, start talking about, getting a plan together and start talking about fundraising and fundraising activities. Well, it sounds like there's a lot more conversations that need to happen. And thank you, everybody, for contributing your thoughts, your idea, your suggestions, your best practices, and shedding a light on what's going on in your market. Hopefully this would give us an opportunity to learn and understand what is going on a larger scale as an organization. And as executive directors and CEOs, we're able to take that back to our tents and talk about this and further this conversation. I want to end with one quote of the day. I love my quotes, and hopefully this will give some sort of inspiration and thinking in the midst of what we are going through. Albert Einstein says, "Remember, in the middle of every difficulties lies opportunity." So I encourage everybody to think, as we are going through this crazy changing time, what are the opportunities we have to look forward to, and jot those down so we can talk further about those opportunities. So again, thank you everybody for your time to this town hall meeting. I look forward to having more conversations in the future.